To the enhanced audience, my apologies for appearing on Zoom. I hope in the future I'll be able to be there in person. And yes, one of the defects or one of the disadvantages of Zoom, I find, is that people are hesitant to talk. Please ignore the camera, ignore the screen. Anybody wants to say something, just jump in. If I think that it's interrupting a train of thought or something, I'll just go on and come back to you later. I want to begin with a quotation. And as I read it, I'd like sorry. All right, I'd like to begin with reading you a short little excerpt, a quotation. Obviously, it's not the first time that I've come upon it, but I'd like you to think along with my reading who the author could possibly be. And then I'll give you my original reaction. I quote, "V'hinei dover yeduahu." I'm not going to translate. It's not necessary. Shebederis ha'achronim. Himtziu heter halvo beribis beter iske. Shenevayer inyonai besomuch. Ulachayro dover pelahu. Shoimatzinu kol remez kal. B'teire lahamtzoaz heter le'iser zeh. V'loi nizbaer hayesoid v'abosis al mero'u chazal livnois amudei haeter. End of the first paragraph. The second paragraph, he's expressing astonishment. In the next paragraph, he has to explain where all this comes from. V'nira b'zeh shero'u chachomenu yesoid v'gam hechrach leheter inyan zeh bichlal. Mishum dechokru uvo atchunas u'isra hazeh b'yesoidei v'ikroi sheb'teira abonoi u'miyusod al inyan v'chai yochicha imoch. Sheoz b'mei nesinas ha'teira hoi ikra yesoid chiyusom v'iskom she'Yisrael avodas ha'adamo. Hoya hayesoid v'amud la'oshram u'lematzovam. Kimi shehoya lo'itvuis v'hamoin hoya nechshav lo'oshir. V'akesef lo'ya nechshav lehem li'ikir v'yisoid ha'chaim. Ikshehoyu lovim b'kesef lo'hoya l'man asois mischar v'kinyan. L'man hesig al yodei lechem ubeged lemishachosoloi b'zeh misodei uvavidosoi ulefizeh memelo muvan ki lo oni haloiva hazeh lo hoyo kol cheshbon l'shalim ribis v'gam lamalva ha'oshir lo hoyo chesura nikir b'havos kasboi b'loi ribis achrei Ki b'chlal lo yehoya lohem esik sofim v'lo shayach b'sneihem b'zeh v'chei yochichu imoch avo b'mei habinayim she'ovdo l'Yisrael chelik v'nachlo b'avodas o'adama. Don't tell that to any kibbutz Eretz Yisrael. V'nisharu goy hachai rak al hamischal levadai le'yochlu oid lahachzik b'isa ribis. I repeat. Le'yochlu oid lahachsi b'yisaribis. Ki ha'kesef nasal yisoid ikri lemtzoi sachayim v'hamischar. V'nase esek haribis esek shove gam lahaloive gam lahamalve v'shayach v'shneihem b'zeh v'chei yochichu imoch v'lochein ro'u chachomim limtzoi heter l'yisur zeh v'choshru shal das kein le'osra teira inyan zeh b'kulo. Kach nearly. Now, I won't ask you to tell me who wrote this. I'll tell you who I thought wrote it. When I read it the first time, I thought it sounds like Blue Greenberg. Only problem is I don't think she could write this kind of Hebrew. Then I thought for 30 seconds more, and I realized this sounds like Jacob Levy. But who's
that?
I'm sorry?
Who's that?
The historian. Jacob Katz, I'm sorry, not Jacob Levy, Jacob Katz. The historian, you
Oh
know,
yeah.
yeah, where there's rabbinic will, there's rabbinic way, and Chazal, and then the Rabbonim did whatever they want. There is Gamish, you do what you want with it, and you make up the halachas as you go along. I mean, that's basically the yesod of the modern chaykrim. What he is telling me, to put it in more refined language, which if a secular scholar would have said it, I would have said, no, it makes sense to him at least, that sure, a Heter Iska doesn't make sense today. I take out my Bible and I say, and I read the parashas Bahar, and I read Parashas Bechukos. I didn't have to read beyond that. I see we're really dealing with an agrarian economy. Everything depends upon produce, and they probably had an economy in which there was a barter economy, no banks. It was primitive. That's how they lived. Who needed money? What good did money do you? Money, you can't eat money. Sure, you use, we've talked on other occasions and probably will again, what money is all about, how it arose in the first place, why we have money in our society, why it's necessary, and where do we get it from Chumash at all? But that's a separate problem altogether. Yeah, once upon a time in the agrarian economy, if the crop failed, you were in trouble. Not only didn't you have seed to plant next year, which means next year you're going to be bankrupt also, but you don't have anything to eat over the winter. So you need money to get you over the winter. You need money for next time. And you need a loan. This is called a provident loan. I know what a provident loan is, so other people know what provident loans are. The Provident Loan Society, it's its name, only it doesn't make provident loans anymore. It makes other kinds of loans. Once upon a time, it may have been a Provident Loan Society. So Halva and Chumash was a provident loan, and of course, it's an Isser of ribis. And now comes whoever wrote this, and whoever wrote this tells me that not only that, but money didn't make any difference anyway. What could you do with money? You can't eat money, and you don't have a stock market. You can't invest money. It's just there doing nothing. So it tells you what to do with your money. Lend it out to somebody. It's a provident loan. It's a form of stock, and you'll get it back to do with the same thing in the future. In the meantime, you don't need it anyway. What did you lose? It's literally. And he's telling me the history of this. And of course, the Makapapatish is, the Soif Posuk is, but Bizmanenu, we don't live on barter, we live on money, and money is worth money. Money reproduces itself by asexual reproduction. And if you take money from somebody, you're depriving him of somebody. You're depriving him of investment opportunities. Investment opportunities are worth good money. It's really something your shavi is. It's not provident if somebody's using it for some other purpose. Okay, I understand from a secular authority. My problem is that I hope, presume that some of you know already, this comes from the Torah T'mima, Parashas Bahar, Perik Kofei, Posik Lamed Vov, and it's Ois. It's in the middle of Ois, Kuf, Tzadik, Beis, I believe. I can't see well enough to see the Aces, but it comes directly from the Torah T'mima. It's a direct quote. And my first reaction is it's got to come from a different Heter and Chas Melahasker. In addition to everything else, I just don't know what he's talking about. He talks about the Heter Iska comes from Chazal. Chazal were Masak the Heter Iska. Where were Chazal from Masak the Heter Iska? Please give me a daf in the Gemara where they say, I'm curious, yeah, I'll find you. But where were they Masak the Heter Iska? In addition to everything else, the Heter Iska, we'll talk about the Heter Iska. That's what this topic about. But basically, it's a Sif in Shulchan Aruch. What were you telling me all about this? And it was in Sfarad as much as in Ashkenaz. In Ashkenaz, I understand he was describing the situation in the 15th century, the 16th century, maybe before that, when Jews lived as middlemen. They went to the Yarid. There were these fairs. There were no big deal, these fairs, Meicher and Lekeach, and you had to have money in order to pay for the goods. And people didn't have money. So they wrote a Heter Iska for all of this. And while the Heter Iska, the Jews wouldn't have been able to make a living. Otherwise, how in the world can you buy wholesale and sell retail? Even the biggest corporations go to the bank to get money because they're not solvent enough to provide cash for every investment, nor do they want to. They borrow. The secret of becoming wealthy in America is to borrow as much as you can, even if you don't need the money. You don't need the money for whatever enterprise you're are you in today, but borrow the money and buy real estate. You'll make money on the real estate. Open another company. The more money you have, the more money you make. So you try to invest or to borrow to the hilt as much as the bank will give you, as long as you have some kind of confidence in what you're doing, and the bank shares that confidence. Of course, that's our society. Once upon a time, it didn't exist this way, but that's where the Heter Iska came. I understand sociologically, it may be true for the prevalence of a Heter Iska, but it doesn't mean that they were massacring all at once. If you have used words like saying that became mefusam and nispazer, or whatever word you want, b'yameinu elu, because there was more need for it than once upon a time, he's right. But don't tell me they invented it just because we had problems. So where there's there's a halachic there's a halachic will, there was a rabbinic way. That's exactly what it sounds like. And that's Chas Milahatzker. I'm sure to mean to say that. And if he says that there's no mocker in Chazal, that's altogether nuts. Of course there's a mocker in Chazal. We'll talk seriously about what it's all about. Once you know the Yesodus of Heter Iska, you know very well that whoever made the first Heter Iska, I don't even mean necessarily the Maram Avigdor's, but even the Sif in Shulchan Aruch, it required a little ingenuity. You take the halachas and you adapt them to whatever has to come out of it. You can do all kinds of things once you have the building blocks. The halacha was the building block. The halacha was there long, long ago. It became more necessary, hence more prevalent in later times, but everything there was available to Yehuda Anossi, to Ravina Ravashi, and to every one of the Rishonim, and you'll find hints of it much earlier than Ram Avigdor's. So again, I just probably no, it's a Toyas Hapulmas or something or other from the Teret Mima. But if it had occurred anyplace else, I would have been the first one to attack it. I'm not going to attack the Teret Mima, but this is not the way we speak, and it's a pass for Jacob Katz, not for somebody else. But having said all of that, it's sociologically, the Teret Mima is absolutely right, but I didn't know that he was a professor of religious sociology or the sociology of religion. If he's explaining it to me, why it's before some in the Kabbalah, of course it's true. Now, let me go back to what this Heter Iska is about altogether. And basically, although I've already begun with, I would what call more hashkaf than halacha, I want to begin today with what is, frankly, more matters of hashkaf than matters of halacha, and you understand exactly where I'm coming from, and you probably know exactly where I'm going. What I use this for is to illustrate what is a simple point in hashkafa, a point in daily life, a point in shmiras hamitzvahs. What are you supposed to do? The Torah has given certain mitzvahs, and the Ramban tells me that I can be a tzaddik yisod olam and at the same time be a novel b'rshus HaTorah. He doesn't tell me exactly what a novel b'rshus HaTorah is, but I'll paraphrase a statement of late Rav Fruderman, who told somebody who is, he wanted to zidel him. He told him, if you knew as many tshuvas as I know, you'd be a goy gomer. What he's saying is that you may know all the kulas in the book. And if you knew all the kulas in the book, and if you were mitzarefim, you would be practicing a form of Judaism that I don't recognize and that nobody else recognizes out there. Yes, there are all kinds of things you can be mitzaref, and that's what the Ramban means. I can be mitzaref whatever kulas I want. I can do things that Torah didn't aser, and I'll end up a novel b'rshus HaTorah. How do I know when I am a novel b'rshus HaTorah? How far can I go and not be a novel b'rshus HaTorah? What does this mean? I can never use that so-called heter, close quote. When's the heter valid? When's the heter not valid? So there are some people out there who use a certain vocabulary which I just don't understand. It used to be das Torah, and more recently by people who don't want to use that because das Torah has a certain negative connotation in certain sectors of our society to which they would like to appeal. They talk about rotzen HaTorah. I don't know what rotzen HaTorah means. I'll just quote again out of context. Reb Mendel Zechariah Varacha, once he said it in a different context altogether. He said in Yiddish, everybody wants to be an Erlich Yid. He says, "Wo steht das am Medav sein an Erlich Yid?" What's an Erlich Yid? I know what a Shem Mitzvah is. I know what an Isser is. I know what a Mitzvah is. I got to refrain from Isurim. I got to do Mitzvahs. And what else is there to be an Erlich Yid? What does it all mean? I'm not going to try to answer that. That's a rhetorical question. You fill it all in. We all know that there can be a noble b'shus HaTorah, and that there can be people who do things that Ruach Chazal were mimeno, even though it wasn't an actual Yisur. I want to know, where is the point of demarcation? How am I, a little Amar Tzmi, how am I supposed to know which is which? When can I say it's perfectly okay? When can I say it's not okay? Can I use an Erev? Can't I use an Erev? Can I use a Heter Mechira? Can I not use a Heter Mechira? Can I use a Heter Iska? Can I not use a Heter Iska? I don't know. What is all of this? Now, let me try to define it, at least in a very broad way. Again, I'll give you one other example, a couple of other examples of things that everyone will recognize as lechalich. I was once at a conference and they had a dinner. I think it was sponsored by the Federation. At the dinner, I found myself seated next to a very, very famous Reform rabbi. And he was a nice dinner companion. I don't know what we talked about. I assure you, not about a difficult Rambam. I realized immediately that he's Navaritz and I have nothing to talk to him about. I didn't eat. The kashrus was questionable. I was hungry. By the time they came around to dessert, I excused myself. I went back and I took a look at the container from which the dessert, part of the dessert from which it came. And I went back and I ate the part of ice cream for dessert. And I asked the waiter for a second portion. As soon as we're finished eating and my neighbor, this Reformed gentleman, gets up and talks, he begins berating me, Shvach and Pebble, that this is Rabbi Bleich. I wasn't eating and wasn't fleshy. It didn't occur to him. But Rabbi Bleich is eating ice cream for dessert, and don't tell me that it's not milk, that it's made from something else. What difference does it make? It's a synthetic milk. It's he starts telling me it's keneged the Rosen HaTorah. He's telling me, and I didn't know the word, I'm sure, it's a harome. And I'm engaged in a harome, and haromes are absolutely forbidden, or at least we frown upon them. So we have things like that. We have other things of that nature. I recall two things together. The first one goes back decades. My daughter became a kala. It was a couple of days after Purim, 3 days after Purim. And we meet in the house of the Machatonim for L'chaim. So I walk in, everybody presses me to take some whiskey and say L'chaim. So as Rabbi Moshe writes in a different context, I took a little bit of whiskey and I made a broche, and I was toyim lekovid hamisubim. It's all fine. I sit down. What's wrong? A shackle, kosher whiskeys, not blended. And then people start hacking me back from every side that I should eat some mezainis, and you have to mach the bracha. You can't get away just with a little whiskey. You have to make a bracha also. So again, I couldn't take it anymore. I took a piece of cake and I made a burimin in mezainis, and I ate a little piece of cake. Baruch Hashem, pochus mikishir lekovid mesubim. 5 minutes later, the Machatenista walks in and she makes an announcement that all the food is shahakel. Her house is already Pesachdik. It's 2 days after Purim. She's reasoning makdimi. The house is already Pesachdik, and she's machshil me in the brochel of Hatola. She didn't certainly intend to that. But then what is this? You're making me a haram is here. You're making cake like this. I assure you, nobody would have known that she was an Oberländer. The Hungarians were excellent bakers, and I've never met one better than my Machatenista. She would have fooled anybody. So what is this? A haram? She makes this Pesach. She serves the Pesach. What's this? A haram? The Torah says, don't eat bread, don't eat cake, and here it is, the more you like. Now, of course, that's a litzonis, and you and I know it's litzonis. The people out there, it's not a litzonis. It wasn't so long ago, no more than 2 or 3 years ago, that people were advertising bulkalach for Pesach lechem mishnah made out of potato flour. And there was a hue and a cry from all sides. You can't do these things. It's a marasayin, it's this, that, and the other. It's a harome, it's some kind of an iser. Marasayin, we'll talk about some other time. And marasayin is not what everybody calls marasayin. But a harome, did I ever hear the Torah says I'm not to eat potato starch? If they wanted to be geyser on kidneys, it was for whatever reason they were geyser on kidneys. All right, there's exera. There are multiple reasons for the exera, because maybe people make a mistake, but it's not because the Torah doesn't want me to have bread on Pesach. If the Torah asks chometz, it's not because it doesn't want me to have chometz on Pesach. If I can manage to have non-chometz bread on Pesach, it's tovei alai bracha as far as the Rabbanu Shlomo is concerned. There may be other reasons which we can talk about when we talk about the Yisr kidneys. We hold there's no Yisr kidneys on potatoes. Chayodim disagreed with us. Okay, but for us, there's no Yisr kidneys. Who cares that it looks like bread? It tastes like bread. I hope it tastes like bread, but it disappeared from the market. You won't see it any far. People thought that was going too far. So the question that one has to ask is, what's a novel b'shus HaTorah, and what is legitimately taking advantage of loopholes? And I wouldn't even call them loopholes. If you want to call them a haroma, I won't stop you. Only I insist that you use the right definition. Haroma is not a trick. Haroma is not a way of getting around something. Haroma means, I think literally, I didn't go looking in a dictionary. If I were Ben Yehuda writing a dictionary, I would write haroma equals in English device. It's a device. Device is a neutral term. It's not good, it's not bad, it's not part of it. Now I'll put in a few other examples and entries. Some aromas are good for your neshama, some aromas are bad for neshama, and some aromas are neutral as far as your neshama is concerned. Some aromas Rabbanu Shlomo decries, and some he approves of wholeheartedly, Loshen Bnei Adam, and some he couldn't care less one way or another. I'll give you just one example of each. We all know about the Chachamim Rishonim who brought in all of their tuah through the door and not through the roof. Why? Because they wanted to make sure there's all mechuyev in trumas and maasros. And what did other people do? Other people use the haroma. They didn't want to be mafresh trumas and maasros. It's too expensive. So you bring it through the roof, you bring it through a window, you bring it through whatever you want. And what is Chazal decry this? Why did Chazal decry this? Because in the process, you're depriving the Levim of Maiserishan. That's their parnasa. And they knew that the purpose of Maiserishan in particular, we'll talk about anything else, the purpose was the Levi should have parnasa. And you found an eitzah, tachbula, aroma, he ends up not having any after in the end. That's not the Rotzen HaTorah. That's aroma that we don't like. And how do I know we don't like? Because I've got common sense. And if that's not enough, I looked in the Tamei HaMitzvahs of various Rishonim, and they told me what the Torah wants. Myself, I'm sure I don't know. Give me any particular mitzvah, I'm not sure I know what the Torah wants. Shamshon Froler thought he knew everything. He knew Tamei HaMitzvah that I never heard of. But that's okay. Rishonim give Tamei HaMitzvah, and everyone will tell you that they're not exhaustive, they're not necessarily authoritative, they have absolutely nothing to do with the application of halacha. Does it have something to do with being a novel Rishus HaTorah? Maybe. If I know the purpose and I try to thwart the purpose, it may just well be that I'm a novel b'shus HaTorah. Here is a aroma that I know is in the category of a novel b'shus HaTorah. Okay, I know of a aroma which is exactly the opposite. I know of a aroma for which I'll get schar in Olam Haba, and that is if I'm a Jewish farmer, bizmanenu, and I have a female cow who has become pregnant, and before it gives birth, I find myself a goy, and I sell the cow to the goy. Because why do I do it? Because I don't want a bechor. This is a mevakeres. She never had a calf before. I may end up with a vlad, which is kochim. I have to bring it to Mizbeach. what's this? It's a kosher book. What is it? A lawyer would call it a tort waiting to happen. Sooner or later, somebody's going to be nichshol in an Isser Milah. Or unfortunately, I don't have a mizbeach makrid on. Now, if I give it to the kohen, I'm only passing on the problem. He has no place to be makrid either before he takes his chalokim in the animal. So my only eitzah is a harama. Yes, selling it to a guy is a harama. And I'm sure and whoever thought this up as if it would be a great hamtzah in the first place, it's what Jews are doing. Baditcher was said, look what Tyre Eden are doing. They go look for a guy and they go look for this bullet because they don't want to be nichshol. Who knows when I'll be nichshol, but they're afraid of being nichshol in some point in the far future. And look at this lengths they go to avoid it. The Ben Shalom is perfectly happy with that, perfectly willing to give a hashpanke on that kind of aroma. Then there's another kind of aroma. I have a house, and in my house I have leftover Erev Pesach, lots of wine, lots of bread, and lots of whiskey. There are three things I can do with it. I can eat it all up, and if it's whiskey, I can drink it all up. And if it's a lot of whiskey, I'll get sicker. If it's a lot of food, I'll probably have to go to the doctor. It's perfectly kosher as far as Yeridei and Arachaim are concerned, but I don't think it's a very good idea. That's one way of avoiding the Yisroel Pesach. I eat it before, the Mitzvah Chinuch will tell me all about whether I'm kind of mitzvah of Tashbisu with that. I don't care about being over this Tashbisu. I'm certainly not over any Yisurim if I eat it all up. Then my second date is I can take it and destroy it. Sounds like Chaval. I can't tell you technically about Tashlis. After all, if it's Erev Pesach and it's right before Zman Yisr, so it's coming at the time of where I can be kind of Tashvisu with it. But I don't need more like a size for Tashvisu. What am I be marble beshuring for all of this? We'll have Chakiris. Is there a mitzvah with every kazayis? Is there not a mitzvah with every kazayis? But why should I do all of this? Then I have a third eitzah. My third eitzah is to find a guy and sell it to him. And the guy's willing to give me, I'll have to sell it at a discount. I realize that not every guy is a fool. The guy you might deal with, I prefer them to be Bali Seichel. Otherwise, I don't know how to get off from square one. But if I sell it to him, I explain everything to him, and he's willing to buy it because he anticipates a profit of one kind or another. So what does the Rebbeinu Shalom say? Is he happy about it? Is he unhappy about it? Or does he sit and say to himself, you got away with it. You did what you got away with it. You did one of the things that you can do to avoid the Isurim. You're not going to get schar for it necessarily, except you weren't over an Isur. But this is not what the Torah said to do, but it's one acceptable way of avoiding the Isur. And if somebody comes and tells me that everyone knows that a Heter Mechir of Chometz is a harama and that it's just a hocus pocus, it's something that rabbis made up at one point or another, and it's really not serious, I laugh him in the face. What do you mean it's not serious? The one thing that I have to worry about in the Mechiras Chometz is that it is serious, and the Goy is serious. And my problem is so many Me'achenu B'nai Yisrael, including ones who should know better, among them a gentleman by the name of Chaim Cohn, who said it's a harama and said he wouldn't enforce it in the court. He just doesn't understand what Mechiras Chometz is all about. It's not a harama to me. If you're using harama in a negative sense, it's a legal device. It's a device, and it has to be valid to the point at which the later achronim or mafalpul doesn't have to be enforceable in the civil court, because otherwise there may be a sorin in Gemiras Das, or who cares about the civil court? If it has to be enforceable in a civil court for Gemiras Das, then we're not talking about a haroma at all. We're talking about a device, a commercial arrangement, which is there to circumvent a prohibition. But who said this prohibition is, who said it's forbidden to circumvent the prohibition? If I sell my chametz erev Pesach instead of getting drunk on it, I am certainly not a novel b'shus HaTorah. On the contrary, if I drink it all instead of selling it to the goy or spilling it out, that might make me a novel b'shus HaTorah. But who would criticize, and chas v'sholem, to criticize anybody who knows what he's doing? He made a shtar mechira kedin, and he has a goy who understands all of this, and he was mad for everything, and he was makbid on every jot and tittle. What is this? This is neutral, sparve. It's not a mitzvah, it's not an iser, it's a aroma, but it's what I call a parve aroma. So we have three kinds of aromas. Now my real problem is in Yonah Diyema. What is a Heter Iska? Is a Heter Iska an acceptable aroma? A aroma that may even be a mitzvah in some circumstances? Is it a negative aroma? Because I'm trying to be a novel b'shus HaTorah. I know there's an issur, I'm trying to skirt it. I want to get around it. I'm looking for loopholes. Or is it just another commercial arrangement? It's not good, it's not bad. Make sure you find a rov to be Mesader that who knows what he's doing, not like the drafters of many heteriskas that you find floating around out there. But as long as you do it, it's neutral, there's power about it. Question. Now, let me deal with all of this. Let me try to put the heteriska in historical context. The Torah Tamima is absolutely right that Bimei Chazal, people didn't have very much reason for heteriska. And if you have a poor farmer who's starving, he has no seed to plant next year's crop, and somebody lends him money but insists on a Heter Iska, he's on novel b'shus HaTorah. He's mechuyed the mitzvah tzedakah, and the Torah says, and you're not doing what the Torah wanted you to do. The Torah is telling you, who's the Torah talking to? Talking to you, the Oisher, and talking to you in your relations with the poor farmer whose crop failed, and says, lend him money, give him what he needs. Halva is even better than stoka. Don't give him stoka, give him halva. Nobody will be mispaish. Go look at the Rambams in the Seder of different forms of tzedakah. It's the highest form of tzedakah. And if you're looking for a heter iskit, get around all of this, and to make profit at the cost of somebody else's misery because he doesn't have enough money to eat. Now, in addition to all of that, you're taking ribbons from him. What do you think next year is going to become a Gvir Adir? And he can afford it to pay the ribbons out of pocket also without feeling the difference? Not likely. You're taking advantage of the other person's suffering. Torah doesn't want you to do that. Of course, we would decry it under the circumstances. I'm sure the Ramban would have called the person who acted that way as a novel b'shus HaTorah. Now let's scoot forward to sometime in the beginning of the 20th century. I have an individual whose name is Chaim Ford. Chaim Ford has come up, he's a captain, he doesn't have any money. He's come up with a bright idea. He wants to build an assembly line in Detroit and produce, I think the first model was a Model A Ford. He's going to produce them cheap, 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 so that every working man will be able to afford a Ford. There's only one problem. Chaim Ford has no money. He has to get money from somebody. Somebody has to finance him. So he comes to somebody who's called John D. Rockefeller. Don't confuse me with history. He comes to a man who's called Yochanan Rockefeller. And he says, mein lieber Freund, my fellow Jew, I need money to put up a factory in Detroit so that I can become rich. I don't have any money. Please be so kind as to lend me the millions that I'll need to put up the factory, and you'll become mitzvah tzedakah. I'll get rich and it won't harm you anyway. You've got enough other investments. If I were Yochanan Rockefeller, I turn around and say, look, I just looked in Chumash, and Chumash tells me that I have to lend loans, provident loans, and tells me why. Your brother should live with you. You just confessed, you acknowledged that you're buying this not because you don't have money to make Shabbos. You're doing this because you want to get wealthy, and you're using my money for you to get wealthy. C'est lo fair. All right, why should my money make you wealthy? If I'll give you money, it's only if I get wealthy too. So I will lend you money and I want interest on my money and not violating I can't say the Ratzon, I don't know what, I'm not violating the intent. What was the intent of the Rebbeinu Shalom? He never intended this kind of transaction. He intended provident loans. So who cares? You're telling me that I'm in violation of the letter of the law. Who cares about the letter of the law? I'm only interested in the spirit of the law, and it certainly doesn't violate the spirit of the law. Now, of course, that's not Hashkafas Hayadus. I may not be violating the letter of the law, but I have to worry about the spirit of the law as well. Otherwise, I become at least a novel b'shus HaTorah and a lot worse than a novel b'shus HaTorah. Now, the question is, what do I do in a case like that? I have to look for a device, I call it. I insist on calling it a device, something which is mutter, doesn't violate the letter of the law. The spirit of the law, we already saw. The spirit of the law was not for John D. Rockefeller to lend money to Henry Ford. That's not what they wanted to do. We're not trying to prevent the stock market from operating. We're trying to prevent other things. We're trying to prevent poverty. But I still have the letter of the law. So if I use something as a device to avoid the letter of the law while not violating the spirit of the law, I call that a haram. To be sure, it's haram. Only haram is not a curse word. Haram is a neutral term. It's a haram which is mutter, at least, whether it's a mitzvah, not a mitzvah. It's certainly not an isser. So that's how I understand the Heter Iska. Now, having said all of that, I have certainly limited the ways in which a Heter Iska can be written. I have talked about a situation in which Chaim Ford is writing a Heter Iska so that he can invest, so he become wealthy. I hear that there are a lot of people out there who write Heter Iskas for other reasons as well, that they want to make a chasana. You have a lamed out there who doesn't have enough money to live from one paycheck to the next, and now suddenly has this huge expense, and the only way that he can do it is by getting a loan, and he knows loans are also, so he writes himself a Heter Iska. He knows he's not buying it to put food on the table, just on the chasana table where he's putting too much food on in the first place, but not in his kitchen. And he's not using it to invest so they can earn a meager living. He's doing this for what is essentially a luxury. When people are doing it, he has to keep up with the Cones, if not the Joneses. And I'm taking money from him. Who says this is mutter? Comes Reb Moshe in the Igros Moshe, and he says that a Heter Iske, number one, is not a lachash. A Heter Iske is not an incantation. It's not a hocus pocus. You just don't mumble, jumble a little bit, and that suddenly makes everything mutter. And says Reb Moshe, you can use a Heter Iske only in situations, number one, in which it is being borrowed for a specific commercial purpose, and number two, it is used for that purpose. If you're not borrowing for a specific purpose, it's not being used for that purpose, you have no business using a Heter Iska. Beyond that, you may invest in something and borrow to invest in something, but we'll talk later about the Heter Iska, but basically it's chatzi milveh, chatzi pikodin. Excuse me for a moment. I don't know if can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, Judy, can you make it so I can see them? I'm sorry, I don't know how to use the computer. Judy, can you make it so I can see them? It says Reb Moshe, one other condition. I borrow chatzi milveh, chatzi pikodin, which we'll talk about later, and I can pay you only profit instead of interest. I pay you profit on the share that you have given to me, bit Teres Iske, as a pikodin to be invested on your behalf. Means that if you if you give me $1,000, it becomes $500 loan, $500 precaution, which I'm investing. And now I write a Heter Iska, and I'm going to pay you 10% of $1,000. I have no right to pay you 10% of $1,000. I can pay you whatever percent I want of $500. Says Rav Moshe, it has to be for an investment that a rational person would believe will accumulate twice the amount that I'm paying you, because I have to get as much as you're getting. We're equal partners here. I have a share and you have a share. You have a skid and I have an iska. So I have to be able to, okay, I'm sorry. Okay, okay.
I lost you. You're off.
I'm off totally.
I think so.
We hear it. We hear everything.
Can you see me?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, I just can't see you. Okay.
We see Dr. Drew's
I'll
wife.
continue without seeing you. Okay. So so he says it's only mutter if a rational person would read it, would believe there's sikuyim that a person would be able to earn the $2,000. You know, most people think if they borrow $1,000, they can earn 1,000, and they can earn 100 to pay off the advance plus whatever they owe. They're ahead of the game. They don't owe anymore. Everybody says, no, if you don't have $100 to put in your pocket at the end, then this is a prohibited aroma. It's somebody who is a novel Rishus HaTorah. You have no right to do this. Okay. Rav Moshe says it. I can show you a few other nice Jews who would take the same position, but I can show you a whole host of Jews who take an entirely different position and say that I can borrow money for all kinds of reasons, even though I don't really have any kind of an ASIC whatsoever. We begin with the Shoel Umeshiv. He came up with all kinds of hamsos. Look, I'm the same former Lamed who's borrowing money in order to make a chasana, but I own a house. If I don't get a loan with a Heter Iska, I'm going to have to sell my house. Where I'll live afterwards, I don't know. That's besides the point. I know the real estate goes up in value. Even if you could give me a house to rent for exactly what it's costing me for the upkeep of the house, I want the house because I want the appreciation in value. I want the increase in the value of real estate. That's an Iska. The real estate market, everybody knows, is an Iska. It's an enterprise. So I'm borrowing you from money in order not to have to divest myself of assets which are appreciating all the time. He calls that a valid Heter Iska. If I'm doing this, I shouldn't have to sell my house, fine. And what about other things? What if I don't have a house to start with? What about somebody who's borrowing money for tuition in order to pay tuition so that he can get a MD degree or an LLB degree, and afterwards be able to enrich himself by practicing his profession? We have PPCs, private corporations. We recognize that professions are businesses of one kind or another, or at least the IRS has recognized that. But is that something for which I can borrow money and allow somebody else to make profit? Or is this in violation of Chayach Imoch? I would respond by saying, who says, I mean, I know that there's a certain institution that we all recognize that has fundraising efforts and claims that supporting tuition funds, scholarship funds is all tzedakah of one kind or another. And I squirm a little bit and say, whoever said that it is tzedakah for me to take money and to pay the tuition or to subsidize this tuition of some middle-class Jewish young man who would otherwise become a plumber or an engineer? If he becomes a doctor or a lawyer, he's going to make a lot more money. But Baruch Hashem, plumbers and electricians, they seem to be earning nice livings. Is it tzedakah for me to support him in this? Camille says it maybe, but to call it tzedakah, I'm not quite certain. He's going to graduate, become a doctor, and make a lot more money than I make. I know I'm a malamed here, but he's going to have the opportunity to make lots of money. Is that mutter or is it a haram? The Shoel Umeshiv has no problems whatsoever. The Shoel Umeshiv says that when I lend somebody money for something like that, I am in effect becoming a partner in his future professional enterprise. And a degree a license to practice medicine is worth money, and I'll prove it to you. If you're a divorce court, now you're sharing up the marital assets. You count the value of a degree as part of the communal property if it was earned during the course of the marriage. The divorce courts put a dollar sign on it. They capitalize it. They think it's worth money. So if it's worth money, I'm enabling you to get rich. There's no problem whatsoever. I am not defeating the Rotzen HaTorah. This is a harama, which is perfectly permissible. Now, not only that, if you're talking about these degrees, there's another area of halacha in which I think it's negei l'maisa, and there I'm much more comfortable with it than I am with regard to the Heter Iska. Heter Iska we'll talk about a little bit later. I think Ramesh is probably right with regard to Heter Iska. As far as the novel B'shus HaTorah is concerned, Hashkof is concerned, is this das Torah, not das Torah, etc., etc. But I'm confronted with shilas all the time. You have a doctor who is asked to do something in the hospital that, as an intern or resident, you can't do it. He want him not to do something. He knows there's a mitzvah of Leisamid al Dam Riyecha. The hospital doesn't necessarily believe there's a mitzvah Leisamid al Dam Riyecha. Or to make it even more stark, this person has signed a do not resuscitate order. And the guy now went to cardiac arrest, and he picked up his telephone, and he got on the other side one of those rabbonim who say, do not resuscitate doesn't mean never resuscitate. There are times yes, times no. Unless I know differently, you have to resuscitate. And I'm telling you to resuscitate. Or I know that there's sikuim that the person will have refuah shleima, and don't tell me he signed a DNR. I'm telling you to resuscitate because halavai, the Rebbeinu Shalom give me refuah shleima. It's not beyond all hope. And the doctor goes and does this. He's not going to stay in that hospital very long. He'll be sued. The hospital will be sued. They don't want this kind of trouble. Is he mechuyev to lose his medical license and go work for a pharmaceutical company, or is this worth more than chemish nachosim? We'll assume that the Lisam Dam Riyecha requires only chemish nachosim, not kol nachosol. That itself is a machlekes achronim, which we don't have to go into. But I would turn around and say, losing a medical license, that's worth a lot more than all the money that I have in the bank. It's more than all the rest of my nechosim. I'm not going to spend more than chemish nechosim. My medical license, I can sell it. The divorce court will take it into consideration. It's worth more than chemish nechosim. So again, we have to recognize that in some circumstances, I don't have to lend you money because I'm lending it to you so you get the medical license in the first place and that you become enriched by it as a result of my loan, which is not at all a provident loan. So we now have whether the Heter Iska is Lefi Ruach Yisrael Sova, or whether it's not Lefi Ruach Yisrael Sova. We've seen that in some circumstances, like when it's like Chaim Ford. Remember, Chaim Ford can do one of two things. Chaim Ford can either decide that he's going to float bonds. He'll issue 5% bonds, and people will lend the money, he'll pay 5%. Or if nobody wants to lend the money, or he finds it financially prudent not to issue bonds, but to float stock, he can not preferred stock that's going to pay a set amount. Yeah, it's just common stock, and if there's a profit, the investor who bought the stock gets a windfall, and Nebach, if it tanks because on the stock market he can't get even his Karen back, so he ended up losing money. Which should Chaim Ford do? Depends. He has to consult his accountants and see which is better for him. But forget the accountants, forget the IRS. I assure you that if Chaim Ford believes in himself and he has a Ouija board and knows that he's going to become a millionaire on the Ford Model A, or Model T. He's going to want to issue stock, he's going to want bonds, not stock. He's not going to share his profits and give somebody else 50%, 40%, 30%. He can get away with 5%. Once he issues a bond, he's not going to pay more than 50%. If I am Yechanan Rockefeller and he offers me these two options, I'm going to look at it very carefully. If I think he's a captain and who knows whether he's going to succeed. I know it's a gamble, but I much prefer to get a bond for which I have recourse, if not today, tomorrow, the day after. Remember, it's not going to be discharged in bankruptcy in halacha. Whenever he gets money, I'll take the shirt off his back. That way I'm at least entitled to the Karen. I prefer to limit my profit because I've also limited my losses. There's always the question whether it's better for any individual, the Malva Deloife, to extend money as a loan or as a deposit. I will give you another hypothetical. It's not so far-fetched. A person jogs every day, and he jogs through Central Park, but he knows that going through Central Park, particularly if you're doing it in the early evening hours, is not the safest thing in the world. And I want to jog through Central Park, but I also have $100 bill in my pocket. I don't want to jog with a $100 bill. I want to divest myself of that $100 bill because enough if I get punched in the jaw and other terrible things happen to me, but I don't want to lose money also. So I call over one of the Talmidim or a friend or who knows what, and I say, would you please take my wallet? It's got a $100 bill in it. You'll give it to me tomorrow morning when we meet in class again. We now have here what I submit is a serious shaila in halacha. Becomes a serious shaila in halacha if I get mugged on the way. Somebody mugs me. I'm sorry, I don't get mugged, but the person that I gave it to gets mugged instead of me. I want to know, do I have a claim against him tomorrow morning for my $100? I didn't get mugged. I didn't lose anything, but I gave him $100. Does he have to repay it or doesn't he have to pay it? Depends. Is it a halva or is it a picodon? There's a world of difference. If it's a halva and he gets and he gets mugged, then sorry, he has to pay no matter what, because a loiv is chayiv in einsein. A shemer socher, shemer chinom is not chayiv in einsein. And I presume that this is like listening to Zuin Boim Olov, and that whatever happened to him was an einis and probably an einis gomor. So it depends. Is it a halva or is it a picodon? So now we'll have to go to Bez, and Bez is going to have to try to figure out what was our intent. But it's clear if I'm an honest person and the other person is honest, we have to have a meeting of minds and we have to stipulate exactly what the meeting of minds is, so that it makes a huge difference for purposes of halacha. And the situation may be ambiguous, and if you're going to have an interior about liability, you're going to have to determine what was the intent of the parties at the inception of all of this. So all of this can become very significant in terms of what's going to happen at the end of all of this. Now, let's now talk about what the Heter Iska is supposed to do. Now, obviously, we have a situation, and the Torah Tamima knew historically what these were all about. We have some gentleman, I call him Mr. Moneybags. He's got capital, but he's long since past the age of retirement. He's not going to go to the Yerid himself, but Oiv Kesef, Yisba Kesef, he'd like to get even wealthier than he is. So he needs somebody to do all this for him. So he gets Mr. Kapson, and he wants Mr. Kapson to be his commercial agent, as it were. You take my money, you go to the Yerid, and we'll split the profit in one way or another. Now, there's a problem here. neither of these parties could have it both ways. The person who is extending the funds, I will call him the financier, to use a power of a term, a neutral term. He's extending the money. He would like profit, and he would prefer no exposure. He wants no risk. When he enters, I don't care what you call it. You can call it whatever you want. You can call it a no risk, no exposure financial arrangement. Don't call it a loan. It's a loan in halacha. It's also, if there is no risk and you got the money and you can do with it as you want, then I don't have to return the same money. It's another one of the criteria. Do I have to return exactly what I got from you, or can I spend it because I was walked past the store at a sale and I want to use it? I don't have my money, so it's yours, but tomorrow I'll replace it with a $100 bill of mine. If it's all nothing prevents me from doing this. It's perfectly mutter. It's Heter gomer. This instrument, call it what you like. A horse by any name is a horse. If there is no, if there is absolute liability, there's no tour of Venus, and I can do with it as I want, it's leitzon nidna. By definition, it's called a loan, and if I'm asking for more than I extended in the first place, it's called ribis, and in the circumstances, it's probably ribis kitzutzo. I would prefer to give my my captain, who's becoming my commercial agent, this money as a loan, just as I prefer to give the person who's holding my money while I'm jogging it. I prefer to give it to him as a loan, and I couldn't care less if he spends it overnight in Lord and Taylor, because what's the difference? He's going to give me another one tomorrow. I don't need this $100 bill back. All I need is its value. On the other hand, this Mr. Kapson, who is accepting the money from Mr. Moneybags, he doesn't want to be liable. He prefers it should all be Iska, because if it's Iska, he'll be entitled to whatever he's entitled to. He hopes that it's all for him and that he can give only a limited amount of the profit to Mr. Moneybags. He doesn't want to be on the hook. If there's an illness of one kind or another, he does kidden natre inche, he invests prudently, but unfortunately, the whole stock market crashes and we have a recession. So there's nothing he can do. He's potter and nothing you can do about it. It's not his money. He took somebody else's money. He's a shamer and he wasn't b'sheya. He's no gneva v'aveda. He's not chayiv. So you have to have a compromise of one kind between them. Now, remember, you have different interests here, and basically what you want is for a meeting of minds. Each one's going to have to give up a little. Each one is going to get something. The earliest Heter Iska, or at least the earliest popular Heter Iska, seems to be that of the Maharam Avigdor's. The Maharam Avigdor's Heter Iska was in the form of not a chatzi mil v'chatzi pikodin. That came much later. Whatever it was, what does Mr. Moneybags want? Mr. Moneybags knows what he would do if he were still in business himself, and he was still harving to earn a living. He knows he'd take this money, he'd go to the Yerid, he'd make whatever he makes at the Yerid, and he'd call it a day. He doesn't have to work 24 hours a day, even if he were doing it himself. So he's perfectly happy for purposes of illustration, and doesn't have to be this way. This was just the way we have it formulated in Shulchan Aruch. The Mr. Moneybags is not he is not too greedy. He's happy to double his money. You take this money, Mr. Capson, you do whatever you want with it. All I want is to double my money. Double my money, and but why should you do this? As soon as the money is doubled, and all the time that you buy and sell until it's doubled, you're my employee, you're my agent, you're a commercial agent working for me. As soon as it's doubled, it will automatically convert to an interest-free loan. and then you do what you want with it. You'll come back from the Urid having done many, many more deals, and we'll settle up when you come back from the Urid. But as soon as you doubled it, you don't have to go to a bank and wire it to me, and you'll be left with nothing. What do you get out of this? Instead, you get to keep it for as long as you can manage to keep it, and you certainly want to keep it as long as you can, because after it has doubled in value, whatever else is there goes to me. So you want to keep it until it doubles in value, and then the rest is mine. That is the way that the original Heter Iska was set up. You're exposed, the financier is exposed, but only for a duration not set in time, but a duration in which it takes to make whatever profit was stipulated in advance. All additional profit accrue to the financier. Now, there is one serious problem with this, and that's the gross problem. This is all that's happening. I'm dividing the money based upon how much you made when you were working for me and how much you made when you're working for yourself. And why did you accept this in the first place? If I would have given you the money to invest from day one for yourself, I would have given you an interest-free loan. Forget about being my employee, my agent. You've been more than happy. You ended up making more money. So we put into this that you have to be paid schar amola. The agent has to be paid for his labor, whatever he is doing on behalf of Mr. Moneybags. He's working for two people. He's entitled to be paid for what he's working for somebody else. I submit, this is an aside, there is one loan that even the Gro would agree you can get the loan interest free, and you don't need schar amola. Banks, they're not doing it right now, but once upon a time they had two kinds of CDs. One was an ordinary CD, the other was the jumbo CD. Ordinary CD paid 4%. A jumbo CD, anything more than $100,000, paid 4.25%. And you know something? I have in my bank account $99,995, and I'm missing $5 to buy an ordinary CD. In the bank, in my savings account, it's getting who knows what, very little. But I want at least the CD of 4%. If I have an extra $5 I can scrounge someplace, I have $100,000, and guess what? I'm suddenly making an extra 0.25%, an extra 0.5%, not only on the $5, but on everything. Under those circumstances, I need no motive to work for somebody else. I'm not working for him so that he gets 5% on his $5. I'm working for him so that I get an extra 0.5% on my $100,000. Without him, I can't do it. So I'm working for myself, not for him. It's the economy of scale. When operating on economy of scale, I don't have to pay you schar amola, or at least I would argue that against the Gro. But forget the Gro. Usually we try to circumvent the Gro by writing in that you're going to get paid for your labor as well. And there are many Heter out there that have the Heter Iska agreement. It provides for schar amola, and now an additional clause: uschar amola kibalti. I was paid already. So that when we come to cash in, I want to be paid whatever this Heter Mechira says. I'm sorry, whatever the Heter Iska says I have to collect. I won't collect schar amola. I won't collect for my labor because I was already paid. So it's an acknowledgement. Acknowledge that he does Baldin. What difference does it make? I won't collect it. That's very nice. I can't collect it in Bezdin, but in the Bezdin Shel my law, was I paid for my labor? Well, I once showed a nusach to this to Rabbi Yankov Kamnetsky, He apparently hadn't seen this nusach in any of the ones that are circulating. He certainly never endorsed the nusach like that. And he simply looked at me and raised his eyebrows and said in Yiddish, "Das ist schon zu viel." Now, I took that as a haskama to my position. That's not just zu viel, but it won't pass muster even if you disagree with the Gro. Schar amola kibaldi doesn't mean that I was paid. You can't buy bread with that. And for skaramola has to be concrete, not just a hidos baldin like a skaramola. Why am I doing this? So I can make a hidos baldin that you don't owe me money? That doesn't make sense at all. But that's one of the, later, I don't know if we'll get to it today, but there are other ways, I think, of avoiding the objection of the Gra so that you can get a Heter Iska, which may just be mutter l'chol hadeis if you're borrowing it for a real commercial enterprise, a real investment, but you're a silent partner, you're not doing anything. I think that you can manage to do this even without schar amola, but we'll talk about that a little bit later. Now, this was an early version of the, what I should say, the post-medieval heteriscus. I don't know whether it existed before, it didn't exist, not really interested. The concept was there, anybody could have done it. You didn't have to be Maram Victor's. He was just a good draftsman, and law firms hire people to be draftsmen. They hire people to think up legal arguments, to find ways and means. I'm not telling you something that's just made out of whole cloth. Once at a legal forum, somebody made an announcement that I'm not a lawyer, and one of a member of a prestigious law firm came over to me afterwards and said, Rabbi, perfectly willing to offer you a contract to work for our law firm, and I know very well that you're not a lawyer, you can't appear in court. I don't need you to appear in court. I need you to think up all kinds of devices. I need you to draft documents. That is not limited to only lawyers. All you have to do is be able to have a Gomorrah cup to be able to think up all of these things. So, okay, anybody could have thought it up even before the Marama Victors. But the Marama Victors draft has a certain advantage and a certain liability. It's advantage to one, and a disadvantage to that person, and an advantage to the other, and a disadvantage to the other. The real problem is what happens if you lose money. The whole point of heteriski is that if you enter into this kind of a document, then somebody's going to be losing money here. And how much money am I going to lose? And under what circumstances? If you use Maram Avigdor, heteriski, I am exposed for the entire time that you were at the Yerid till you got there. I'm the guy who gave you the money. It's my money. You're investing it for me. On the way with our highway robbers, you are putting my money at risk, and my money remains at risk in the Yerid. You don't make $1,000 on one deal. You make a deal with $1,000, you end up with $100 profit. Next time you invest $1,100, and you end up with $1,200 profit. You end up with $1,200. Now you have $1,300 to invest. Whatever this is, you keep on reinvesting the income, the profit, the return, call it what you like, as well as the Karen. Every time you do this, it's my money, and my money is at risk. And it becomes a fire and destroys the entire fair, the entire marketplace. It's my money that went up in flame. And until I get a telegram from you saying, Baruch Hashem, I already made an extra 1,000, it's now 200, and now I'm using it as an interest-free loan, I don't sleep nights. Why don't I sleep nights? Because all of my money is exposed. That's what's bad for me. What's good for me is that as soon as you make you make an extra $1,000, I can sleep soundly. As far as you are concerned, the person who's borrowing it, look, you're getting Saramola, very nice. What's Saramola? You'd make more if you got the minimum wage someplace else. You're working, but you're working for me, and I'm making money, and you're making money on somebody else's behalf. And it's true that only half of your money is exposed because half is alva. The other half is my money, which is exposed, but you are being denied profit opportunity. I would much rather invest $500, $100,000 than $100, than $500, besides economy of scale. In the meantime, I have none of my money to invest. I want to be able to start making money as soon as possible. So this doesn't really work for anybody. And there are other things going on here. If we did Marama Victors, if I could possibly find a way We have to set a date of payment. Payment date's presumably as soon as everybody comes back from the Urid. But if I could somehow take a detour to Florida for the winter, so I don't have to show up until 6 months later, I'd be a lot happier, because in Florida, I can keep on using the money. I said I'd promise you payment immediately upon return, but I didn't repay it. So what? What are you going to do to me? There's no penalty for late payment. That penalty for late payment becomes its own little problem. It may be a Rivas problem. We'll see that some other time. But I would like to procrastinate. And why shouldn't I procrastinate? The longer I procrastinate, the better it is for me, and the worse it is for you, because you have no money to do anything with. At the same time, again, I pointed out the problem with the exposure of the full amount until you earn another some equal to that. This is not necessarily to everybody's advantage. And me, as the money bags, I would like to have some means to force you to pay as soon as possible. And one way of doing that is to make you want to get rid of this agreement so that you can have as much money as you have in your hand to use for your own purposes. And we want to make everybody equal in terms of exposure to risk. So we're sharing the risk equitably. We're both in this together. Both of us want to make money, so we'll share the risk also. That's only fair. So what do? We end up with the Heter Iska of the Chochmas Odom. That is, I believe, I shouldn't say, I'll amend this just a little bit. That was the Heter Iska in vogue from the time of the Chochmas Odom until relatively recently. That was the standard Heter Iska. The standard Heter Iska wasn't Heter Iska Marama Vigdors, but it was the standard Iska of Chatzi Milva, Chatzi Pikodin, Chatzi. It was the Heter Iska of the Chochmas Odom. And incidentally, if you read my article on Heter Iska, somebody made a mistake. It wasn't me. But in setting the type, they put a sentence calling it Chatzi Iska, Chatzi Iska Chatzi Pekodin when I was describing the Rama Victors, and the other kind when I was describing the Chochmas Odom. Two sentences on two different pages somehow got exchanged, but that's not our problem. This then became the standard Heter Iska, including the Skar Amol Kibalti, and that is the Heter Iska that is out there. Now, we're already at 4:30. I know we started late, so I don't feel too bad. But I have a lot more to say, and Yuz Hashem, we will talk about it. I just want to make one additional point. And the additional point is that I have seen very few Heter Iskis in the form of the Mama Vigdors, or in the form of the Chochmas Odom, or even in the form which I have drafted, which is found in Contemporary Halakhic Problems, Volume 2. In English language, Rocha B'Chaktana, I am convinced it will hold up in the court of law, but we'll worry about that another time. The real point is that we are left with something entirely different in the world out there. I have seen many, for those who, Blumberg forms. Blumberg is a printing house who prints legal forms in the courthouse area downtown. You can walk into any stationery store and ask for a Blumberg, whatever you want, and they'll give you a form, give you a pad of forms to use, and you fill in the blank. I have seen loan forms, IOUs, promissory notes that have Blumberg on the bottom, drafted by two so-called frum Jews. And then I see rubber stamped. Somebody has a rubber stamp for all of this. He writes rubber stamped on the margin, the top or the bottom. Al pi Heter Iska. Now, we'll talk about whether this works for Heter Iska or it doesn't work for a Heter Iska. Heter Iska doesn't have to be Biksav, remember. Heter Iska can be Balpeh also. Just you have to have the evidence if you're going to Bezdin to enforce it as a Heter Iska. But if you came to a Bezdin with this, I scratched my head. What would the Bezdin say with this? I see a Tarte de Sasri. Inside, in the text of the note, the Shtar Chayiv, it calls it the Shtar Chayiv, Shtar Sheyesh Beribis. In the margin, it's called Api Heter Iska. My first problem is, who's Heter Iska? What Heter Iska?
I'll write you a dozen Heter Iskes. Maram Avigdor's Heter Iske, Trachmas Odom's Heter Iske, Bleich's Heter Iske, Joe Blow's Heter Iske. Anybody can write his own Heter Iske. You don't have to be an Achron or a Tachtain to write a Heter Iske. Any businessman can write his own Heter Iske. It's not like a holographic will where, it is like a holographic will. You proceed at your own risk. You better do it right, because you don't get it right, you're going to be nichshon averos. But I don't know what this means. What am I going to do in Besdin? The person who is being asked to fork over the money can proceed to say that it's like a shtar mezuyif in addition to everything else. It's got a text and you wrote in the margin, and it's clear that it's not part of the text of the margin. It's clear that it is a rubber stamp. Anybody could have done this. I don't know who did this. I certainly can't treat it as a real Heter Iske. The Adim didn't sign on this. No reason to believe they did. They signed on the text. How do I know they signed on what's in the margin? And it may be enough to passel the whole star so that you can't claim anything from it. That's my problem with what's going on out there in terms of the Heter Iskes. Most Heter Iskes out there are no better than what I described. Some of them have in the text, not a rubber stamp. So they wrote into the text, Al Pi Heter Iske. I don't know which Heter Iske, so it's in the text, it's not Mezuyif. Some write Al Pi Heter Iske de Maharam. Nobody ever intended that Iske Maram in our day, I assure you. They all think it's a Iske of Maram, of the Chochmas Sodom. So again, we turn around and say, too bad you signed on it. And we have a principle in halacha, which we can examine another time, that you knew what you were signing on. I would come and add that Anan Sada, you don't know what you're signing on. Ask 10 people in any base medrash what the Heter Iske Maram Avigdor's is, and I don't think that 9 of them will know what Heter Iske Maram Avigdor's is. I don't think that 4 of them will know what the Heter Iske Maram Avigdor's is. And just because you wrote a Heter Iske Maram doesn't mean that they know that this Maram is the Maram Avigdor's. I'm not sure that there isn't the Muchach that didn't know what they were signing. But I think we got a little bit too far. I have not entered into all the different kinds of Heter Iske. Sometime, or the next time, or another time, I will begin by talking about the Heter Iske of Bnei Brak, which I believe, Heter Iske Bnei Brak, I don't know who authored it. I know that it's out there. It's adopted by Israeli Branks. And I think that it's probably the standard Heter Iske. I can't tell you about every storefront lawyer, but the Heter Iske of most Yedei Dovar who prepare Heter Iskes. It's not my Heter Iske, but it provides for something totally different. I'll try to explain it and to argue that it makes it glot, the Heter Iske of Bnei Brak. Bnei Brak looks for humorous or looks to avoid Shilas Halacha. I believe whoever did it in order to overcome the objections of the Gra. And if you have that kind of a Heter Iske, you have something which is mutter l'choladeis. Of course, the other way to do it is to pay somebody a reasonable amount for doing whatever he's doing in handling the investment. If you pay him a reasonable amount and he doesn't write that Skar Amoli Kibalti, but he really got a Skar Amola, then it should be mutter for the Gra also. The Gra is only concerned with symbolic payment of wages or fees for doing things, and everybody knows that it's de minimis and nobody works for that pittance. But if you do it for a significant amount, it may be permissible. There are lots of investments out there that carry fees that are not de minimis and which can really serve as Skar Hamola. Again, we're way over time, to be continued in the future.
Shkoyach.
Thank you, Rebbe.
Next time, I hope to see you not only on Zoom, but in person.
Okay.